All right, and welcome everybody to another episode of Enough to Keep Going. This is episode 123. That means that our 125th episode is going to be our lead-off episode when we return for the new year. We've got a few more shows left in us before we wrap up this year. Joining me tonight is Swissguard. Swissguard, how are you, sir?
Not doing too badly.
Boy, that almost sounds convincing.
Well, I forgot, I put something down in my spreadsheet like 6 months ago. My game tracker spreadsheet that we
Okay.
all have for Mech Warrior 5. And when I remembered that it was coming out like today, I had already kind of used up my gaming budget. So
Uh,
um, I'm not going to be able to play that for a little while longer, I guess. Not.
Well, by the time that you can play it, it's going to be on sale and discounted. So
It's the plan.
it'll stretch your gaming budget a little bit more, and that is very much the modus operandi here for the holidays as we head into sales. But if you miss some of those big sales around Black Friday, kind of the prices have gone back up. But again, you probably get a few more here and there in between Christmas. But then all the digital stores usually end up with a Christmas New Year's sale as everybody gets their new devices as well. But that's not what we're going to talk about. This is episode 123. This is our GX show. This is our game experience show. Every other week here on Enough to Keep Going, we come back with a deep dive episode into the news, and on the off weeks, we are in our playlist. So that is what we have tonight. And actually, we've got an assignment that we had from 2 weeks ago. This assignment is our end of the year kind of wrap up assignment. Looking back over the past year, the assignment was to go back and revisit or play some games that you think, hope might be in game of the year contention discussions, and spend a little bit more time with them in order to make some decisions. And we're not gonna go in too deep probably on our final decisions maybe, but we'll see. Maybe this is the time when we talk about these because we're not going to talk about them next week at our Game of the Year's superlative show. So next week, the whole crew will be here. All four hosts will be here for Enough to Keep Going's 2019 wrap-up show. Where this is our Game of the Year, Game Experiences of the Year. We've got 2 episodes. We'll be recording next Monday and Tuesday back-to-back episodes so that we can we've got an extra long discussion. These are usually some of my favorite discussions all year. This and E3, we usually really dive in and have some good discussions. So this is where, we are not the Game Awards in terms of you're going to tell us what the game of the year is and what the artistic design game of the year is and the mobile game. We're going to ask questions like, what game did you have the most fun with? What game did you wish you played more? Which game do you regret not playing?
Which game are you
We're
most
probably also
disappointed in?
oh yes, most disappointing. And I think for a long time I thought it was going to be something, but I think I'm going to switch it. So, um, we'll have a number of different categories here. And Swiss, I have not decided on all my categories. I really need to, at least on all my choices for the categories, I really need to sit down and think about this a little bit more. Last year, I really felt confident in some of those decisions, but this year, I don't know that I'm as confident as I was. How are you feeling about your Game of the Year choices?
I haven't put much thought into it as of yet. I have a few ideas for some, but I kind of feel like you do it. It's been kind of an odd year for big titles. Um, so, I have some ideas, but yeah, I have. It's probably going to be next Tuesday during my lunch break at work. Really sitting down and forcing myself to make some choices, or Monday
Well,
or whenever it
considering
is
that
that
we're
we're going to
recording
record.
on Monday
Yeah.
night and Tuesday night, I hope you think about it a little bit before Tuesday. So, but I know you thought about some stuff for tonight, and we've got a big list of games that we've been playing. But first, let's dive into that assignment, our Game of the Year kind of wrap up in terms of what is left on our playlist that we want to go back and explore. So, you picked a more recent game, one that has gotten a lot of hype, one that has gotten some kind of extreme reviews on both ends, kind of divisive. So talk to us about Kojima's Death Stranding.
Um, so I think on one of the last GX shows, I actually brought this game up, um, and was a little bit surprised and concerned that the rest of my colleagues on E2KG uh, were avoiding this like the plague. But um, I I'd been introduced to the game. I wanted to spend more time with it. Like I hadn't gotten enough into the game to really make any strong determinations. So that's why I picked it for this week's report out. What possible Game of the Year title do you need to spend more time with? Uh, and to be honest, the game is growing on me. I am buying in. So
That's great. Last time you talked about it, you were kind of still engaged with it.
yeah,
So I'm glad that it's held on to you.
well, and this is going to present a contrast for another game that I'm going to talk about later in the show. But overall, like Death Stranding is a very simple concept, right? Uh, you're taking things from point A to point B. You There are trials to overcome uh, during the traversal, but for the most part, point A to point B. What makes it work is the world building around it. For me, like I dig Hideo Kojima's kind of quirkiness, and I like the sci-fi setting, and I am buying into um, what the game wants you to be. Like even Die Hard Man, who's kind of like the Colonel. What's the Colonel's name in Metal Gear Solid? Who's always on your. Uh,
Oh yeah,
he
yeah. I know.
predates Otacon, but whatever.
Yep.
Uh, he's kind of that character. He's trying to convince you, Sam Porter, to accept this kind of responsibility and mission. And he's like, we got to get everybody connected. We're all scattered. We can do this. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to buy in, and I'm going to try to reconnect the United States, the United Cities of America, and get things going again. So it because of the cinematic qualities and the characters, I am finding uh, well, the main character Sam I like uh, it's drawn me in, and I can buy into the fact that overall the gameplay is fairly rudimentary. It's a simplistic type thing. Um, so so that's been good, and I am eager to continue playing it.
So do you feel? I mean, this is kind of it really spiked and kind of peaked, but actually, last week, Agassicles and myself were talking about it in terms of as we ran down the Game Awards, that we put it up there as deserving to be there because it seems to be doing something different than just kind of polishing up existing genres. Does it feel, as you were talking about, kind of simplistic in terms of the concept of delivering things here and there? Does it feel like it's that much of a reduction in its gameplay, or is it more of the experience is more the sum of the spreadsheets?
I was I was thinking about this today, this question. So it's simplistic in that, like I said, it's point A to point B. You're carrying cargo. Don't get your cargo busted. When you get there on the way. There's a little bit of you have to make sure your pack is balanced because they do some physics stuff where if you have like a really heavy thing on top and then some light stuff on the bottom, you're going to be very uh, off kilter. You try to turn and he'll tumble over. Okay, so they have a little bit of that. So there's a little bit of micromanagement involved. Um, but when I was thinking about it, I was like, it almost draws from like mobile games because like with the mobile game, it's like yeah, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm playing with, and yet people can churn away for hours on this piece of concept. Now, in terms of Death Stranding, it's built up with this really great sci-fi uh, infrastructure like around it. So, but your Farmville, if you want to reach back in time for a while, and stuff. It's just like, hey, you're doing some repetitive task, and there are games with like more complicated systems or grander systems, and yet people are still engaged because they're buying into just what the work entails, I guess you could say. So I felt like there was a little bit of a hint of that. I don't know if it was intentional. I don't think it was. I think he started with a concept of connections, and that's what he likes to do. He likes a theme, and he builds the game around the theme. But I kind of got that vibe. It's like, look, I'm going to zone out, and I'm just going to focus on traversing the hills, and then the game will like zoom out and start playing some cool music tracks or whatever. And there's a little bit of a zen quality to it when you're out in the open world there. So no, I don't think it's a problem. And I think it's just different, and it's something we're not probably used to seeing in a triple A title. Uh, the glass half empty folks will say it's just like a cheap experience, a cheapened experience. But like I said, we've had a lot of discussions on E2KG about um, I don't remember what the term was we used. Making your own fun. You guys talk a lot about it in terms of like Madden and MLB the Show. Like
Yeah,
I'm
kind of
going
being
to
able to tell your own story,
yeah,
right?
and fortunately we have a cool story. For me, I have a cool storyteller helping the sci-fi thing, but I'm able to put myself into the world and experience the world through the main character Sam Porter. So it's working for me. Now,
That's great. That's cool. Okay. Oh,
that
there's a
being
but.
s- there, that being said, I would not put this as a runaway game of the year title. I think it, like you said, it deserves to be up there, but I still haven't quite decided which direction I'm going. I feel like there's a lot of contenders, but there's nobody like broken away from the pack. And you know, in the last few years, there's been one or two games that I've felt have been head or shoulders above, and it might have been a toss up between the two, but they were clearly separated. And this year, I don't feel like there's a game like that. However, there are some. And one of the superlatives is one of the games we maybe wish we would have played. There are a few that I'm already identifying that I have not touched and I haven't purchased yet, but maybe would be involved in that. But we'll see.
Okay, so let's stick on the uh, game of the year contention here, and I want to. So I played two games over the last 2 weeks. One of them being Sekiro. So, and I had talked about this. I had talked about Sekiro 2 weeks ago on the Game Experience show as I was playing Jedi Fallen Order, and kind of a similar, almost it's very light on the Souls-like combat, but there's the timing, there's the parrying aspect, and so I thought, one, I was dying plenty just on normal difficulty in Jedi, so I wasn't too keen on my chances of success within Sekiro, but I knew that I wanted to give it a try, given all kind of the game of the year hype and quality to it. And you played this back in the spring, did you not, Swiss?
Yeah, I pretty much got it right after launch, I think.
And
Um,
how far did you end up getting into it?
uh, I mean, I got a decent ways in. I feel like I forget where I kind of stalled and then probably got distracted with another game and haven't gone back to. What have you fought? And I was,
Not much.
okay, have you?
Um,
All right, did you
Go ahead.
fight the general like on the battlefield on the horse yet?
No,
Okay, so you're really early. Yeah,
I'm really early.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
So
You can spoil anything you want for me. I'm really early, and I'm still trying to figure out. I gotta have some patience with it. I think is what my I was diving into it with the expectation to kind of have it grab me, and I can see it's executed very well, but it hasn't really grabbed me in terms of that. Like, I feel like I need to give more of myself to it than I am receiving from it at this point. So I'm curious, did it grab you? Did you kind of go into it knowing that you were gonna sit down and learn these systems, or when did it kind of pull you in past that give up point?
I think it's good that I tried Bloodborne before I tried Sekiro, because Bloodborne to me, what you're saying about Sekiro sounds like how I felt about Bloodborne. And I was like,
Ah, okay,
I don't like. For me, it was one, I didn't like quite like the setting. I'm not really into vampire, whatever monster story type stuff. But two, I was getting beat up and I didn't quite. It just didn't hook me. Uh, I knew that Sekiro was similar, but had much more of an action vibe. And so when I got into Sekiro, for me, the changes they made were catered to more of my tastes as a gamer. And I know that for
sure.
some people that are like diehard Souls fans, it didn't. It went in the opposite direction. They're like, you cheapened it a little bit. But so I liked that aspect of it. I liked the challenge of it. And for me, like I'm kind of into Japan and that time period in any way. So
Yeah,
uh,
the setting is really cool. I mean, they do a good job of kind of setting of immersing you in that world. Yeah, it is. It's very much the mechanics part where I feel like I need to.
did
Um,
now when
yeah, go
I
ahead.
started playing it much more as staying on the rooftops and trying not to treat it like a beat 'em up, but treating it almost like a stealth game.
Hmm.
I started having a lot more success and moving forward, and I was it was hard, but there was always just enough there for me to okay, I'm going to try this one more time and see if I can get a little bit farther or change this tactic. And yeah, I got a lot farther in the game than I figured that I would. So like I was surprised at how much I advanced in the game. Um, so uh, I
Nice.
still
That's
intend to go back to it at some point, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, good. That gives me a reason to kind of. This is what I was hoping for. I was hoping to kind of pick your brain a little bit to give me the sideline pep talk to get back in and give it another try because at this point, I'm okay that it's not for me. I can appreciate its design and its implementation, but I'm struggling with uh, enjoying
That's a problem in a video game.
it. Yeah, fair enough. So the other game I played is one that I have heard about since the summer, and I had picked at it a little bit, but that is Outer Wilds. So Outer Wilds, not Worlds. Um, it is an indie game, came out in June. It You are an alien explorer, and you're kind of it's within the first I don't know, within the first 10 minutes, by the time you launch your ship and get out exploring, you realize that things are amiss. You're kind of stuck in a time loop that gives away a little bit, but it's really only the first 15 minutes. And so there's a lot of kind of mystery and exploration there. It's a really The graphics are kind of simplistic, but at the same time they work.
The,
They
the,
make you feel like you're in this humble little corner of the universe. Your ship is kind of duct taped together in some ways. It looks like the explorers put it together with their tilt-a-whirl spaceship container from the 1980s. Um, but really, it has a real kind of uh, folksy humbleness, uh, kind of a subtle. charm to it as well. But there, at the same time as I'm playing it, I'm also thinking about kind of some parallels to uh, No Man's Sky in terms of the exploration, the survival. You know, in No Man's Sky, you really are kind of just going out there and exploring. You're harvesting. You're really kind of making your own adventure. Where here, there is some of that uh, exploration and kind of freedom, but at the same time, there's enough hooks that are giving you a little bit of a mystery around the story and giving you a reason to kind of explore. The challenge there that I found is I think that you either kind of that exploration mystery, that kind of obtuseness of the world either gives you a puzzle to kind of solve and you dive further into it, or it potentially pushes you away. And at some point, you know, when I got frustrated and wasn't really sure how else to go solve the mystery, um, I was longing for the simplistic freedom of No Man's Sky in terms of I just want to explore these worlds. I mean, they've created a really interesting piece, and there's some alien legacies and some other pieces here to explore. But in Outer Wilds, there is this extra kind of narrative piece that you're trying to get at, and that itself is engaging, right? I mean, I think the pitch of if I flip that and say the pitch of Outer Wilds is the exploration of No Man's Sky with more of a through line narrative, sounds pretty good on paper. It is that through line narrative is not heavy. It still is. You're kind of discovering it. You know, you're not having somebody tell it to you or talk to you. There's a lot of kind of environmental storytelling that goes on with it. It has your ship kind of controls like I'm playing Lunar Lander on my Vic 20. There's a lot of like thrusters, and I'm adjusting my thrusters, and there's some fun to that, but there's some kind of obligatory lack of control in it as well because your ship is kind of ragtag and hobbled together. It's not a really smooth flowing. It's not very precise, and so it works within the concept and the conceit of the game. Um, so I really enjoy. I don't know. I'm 2.5, 3 hours in, so not huge. Um, I really have enjoyed most of it. There have certainly been times where I felt frustrated and longing for the freedom of No Man's Sky, but then I'll set it down and a couple days later I've come back to it again and kind of tried to go instead of going to that planet, I'll go explore this planet. Um, I hit a dead end and see what happens next. There are so it's it's a small little game, but it's really well done for what it's trying to be.
It's
I'm enjoying it.
it's kind of an indie studio, right? But
It's very much an indie studio.
okay.
Yep.
So you
Yeah.
mentioned the time loop, and that maybe raises red flags for me. So is this like Majora's Mask time loop, or is it like a roguelike type implementation of a time loop?
I would say that it's not a roguelike in terms of I'm not, it's not like Void. It came out the same time as Void Bastards, which is very much a roguelike kind of, right? You're taking a character as far as you can. You may unlock a few things, but then you're starting a run back over. It's not necessarily run based in that way. There is some roguelike aspects to it because you do die eventually, and you know, um, but I am not far enough in to know that if it is like a Majora's Mask, like uh, you know, I feel it's pretty clear that you're starting over again within the same, you know, time period. Every time you die, you're kind of back. But it doesn't. I have not unlocked enough of the mystery to know if it's because something cataclysmic is happening, or if I'm just kind of stuck in this loop until I figure out the connection to the ancient civilization that I'm trying to find out. So So it is in that way. There's more. It is not as punishing as like a roguelike might be. Um, or it's not designed to like in a roguelike the anticipation, the expectation is that your runs get longer as you know the spaces and systems. That's I don't know that that's necessarily the case here though too.
You mentioned the spaceship kind of being a little bit clunky to what was the game you referenced?
Lunar Lander,
Lunar Lander.
like or it's got multiple different names, right? Like
I
where you've
remember
got your
Solar Jetman for the
yeah,
NES.
right, kind of like that, where you got thrusters, right? You've got multiple different thrusters that you're trying to balance as land perfectly or bring yourself up and over and then land back down without crashing.
Hmm.
Right, yeah, in that same kind of concept. Yeah, the Solar Jetman.
All right. Well, it's kind of it's interesting. Like there are times when I'm like, man, I don't want them to force feed me the story and like you discover it yourself, but for that to work, you have to have like a really cool and well developed world, I think, um, for that method of storytelling to work. And I'm finding you strike me that like on the one hand you're kind of buying in, and on the other hand it's not quite engaging you enough. Like
I
you're
think
like I'd
that's accurate,
I'd
right?
be interested if they discussed it more, but I'm not interested enough to go out and discover it on my own as much.
Yeah, like I'm interested in it when I discover it on a planet. I'm very interested in it, but oftentimes when I am trying to discover it, it either feels too obtuse and I'm not sure how to figure out the puzzle that it's giving me, or I am fighting some of its mechanics in terms of getting over to the next planet, um, to be able to continue that. Right? There's been yeah, so I think there is that aspect. So so again, we looked at Death Stranding, we looked at Sekiro and Outer Wilds, three games that deserve some to be in the discussions around Game of the Year superlatives. Whether or not they'll make it there, you're gonna have to tune in next week. But let's talk about what else we've been playing over the last 2 weeks here, Swiss. And you've got a game that I have not really heard of, but I want to know more about. So, what is Warsaw?
I randomly saw the announcement on I think Blues News back several months ago.
On Blues Clues? You're
I'm
watching
not
Blues
Blues
Clues?
Clues, Blues News.
I know you said that, but I
Oh, I
was
did.
just
I didn't
yep.
know if I said it or not because
No, no,
there's a
no.
very good chance that I said Blues Clues.
It's very possible, especially now that it's coming back on the air.
Yeah.
So,
What were we talking about? Just Warsaw.
Blues Clues. I mean, Warsaw.
Well, all right. So anyway, they announced the game, and it's made by an indie studio. I think Pixelated Milk is the name of the company. They're out of Poland. But what intrigued me about this game is it's set in World War II, and one of the more interesting stories from for me in World War II is the uprising in Warsaw. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson before we get into the game because it'll explain how the game is set up. All right, August of 1944. All right, so we're after Normandy. So United States and Britain, everybody starting to push in from the west. You got Soviet Union starting to push in from the east, and while we're still just a few months past Normandy, we're already starting to have the Germans get compressed, right? A little bit. What a lot of the Allied resistance fighters would do is, as the armies were coming in, that's when they'd have their uprising in the city. Um, the Germans would end up leaving because the Americans or whoever are about to come in anyway. But the optics looked good for you know whoever to have liberated themselves in conjunction with the Allies coming in. So it was kind of like, we can do this now. The Germans are in a weakened position, and we got the Allies about to roll in to help us. Right? That was that was like the theory. It didn't work that way in Warsaw. You have the Soviet army coming in. The resistance fighters decide this is the time. The government exile, we're going to do it now. Start the uprising. The Soviet army stops at the river next to Warsaw. Does not do anything. Does not help. Does not contact. Nothing. This gives the Germans time to basically counterattack, put down the uprising in Warsaw, wipe out a lot of the resistance, and then the Soviets came in. So this, a lot of people say, Stalin didn't want a pro-Western government, liberating the city. So they waited. Basically, who would have been resisting, the communists were wiped out by the Germans, and then the Germans were in a weaker position anyway. Soviets came in and started, kept on their march westward.
Hmm.
So that sets the stage for this game. You are going to lose, and that's why this interesting
Oh,
about the
interesting.
roguelike aspect is, eventually your resistance is going to fail. You play a unit that's in that's trying to liberate the city. Um, the graphics are like kind of comic booky cartoon graphics, but it's all presented in a very serious way. Uh, and you have, I guess the biggest comparison of the game is Darkest Dungeon, I think is the name of the game. I've never played it, but that's what I've been seeing a lot of people say. You have a map. You move around the map. You can discover items. You can, as your icon moves around, you can hit like effectively a random encounter, and then you're put in kind of this 2D turn-based strategy mode for the battles. Um, Basically, they have it set
Oh,
where,
wow, it does look like Darkest Dungeon.
yeah,
Yeah.
they have
Yep, that same type. Yep. Go ahead. They have it set.
regions in the city. Each region produces some set of morale for your resistance to continue. However, the overall morale produced by the city is less than you lose every day. So over time, you're going to be losing morale. As you get encounters and events will happen, you could maybe boost it temporarily, but eventually you're going to succumb to this, right? And I wanted to like the game for the history aspect, and I think I'm going to still keep playing it. But we talked a lot about being drawn in, and I had to know a lot about like the history before I would even be drawn into this. You know what I mean? There's no character
There's no
dialogue.
character building.
There's like a
There's
few a paragraph that they do like a bio of each type of unit who's a character, but there's no, they're not talking to each other. There's no story. The big thing that I
huh.
pulled from it was I saw a lot of like, I know this it's probably inspired by Darkest Dungeon. I haven't played it. The one that I've played that reminded me of it a lot would be Banner Saga, in the
Mm-hmm.
like, you have resources, you have all this population, you have the events that pop up, and you have to be able to kind of balance your units and your supplies and whatnot over time. But they wove that into a really interesting, um, fantasy story type thing, and this has none of that. It's purely just go in there, grind, and fight, and see how long you can keep the resistance going. And yeah, I think that's a problem because it's a grind. And you talked a little bit about Sekiro not being fun. I wouldn't exactly say that the turn-based strategy of the battles is entirely um, satisfying. I have much more fun in a game like, well, a little bit like Banner Saga, but like, or Fire Emblem, you know, tactically moving around the map. There's a little
So does it
bit.
feel like there's less tactics there, less strategy, more than just kind of, I mean, you feel like, can you strategize based on who your characters
There's
are?
you can utilize. There's like basically two rows, like, here and here.
Yep.
And if you're on one row and you shoot somebody on the opposite row, you get a little bit of a flanking bonus. You can have barriers in the map. Depending on where you're positioned, forward or back, you have different skills like or attacks that are available to you. Um, so there is some strategy involved in the battles, but it it wasn't uh, a grand strategy. Grand strategy is
Hmm.
probably the wrong word, but like when you play chess and you do well at chess and you're maneuvering the pieces on the board and you're thinking a few steps ahead and um, there's some intellectual stimulation there. Like you're in control, and this feels a lot like line up. Make sure you use the barrier and just kind of make sure you heal at a at a good clip or and trust the um, random number generator to get some good hits and some criticals. So it even with Fire Emblem, I think the moving around the map for me in a strategy game is really important for like that tactical satisfaction. Um, well, you look at a game like old school Final Fantasy with the active time battle system. Yeah, we got some dudes lined up over here, we got some dudes lined up over here, and we do an attack or we do magic, and we got to make sure we have the mana, whatever. The battle system is a little bit like stressful. It felt like this game was more stressful because it was so easy to lose lives. But that's all wrapped up in this grand narrative. And I feel like if you had a game like Final Fantasy with no huge narrative, it would be a very uh, difficult slog, I would say. So
Right. That's your investment is in the narrative itself.
yeah,
Really
it
seems like these
helps.
characters are primed for a narrative. I mean, the animation style, the graphic style feels like even the real life stories that you told just in the beginning here feels like it's ripe for some type of
I
narrative
think it's just
exposition and character
I
development.
think it's the limitation of the indie of like the indie studio. So I mean, there's like little they have a codex that you can read, and you can read like so and so joined the resistance because X or Y. But pretty much, I go into my hideout. I maybe buy some supplies. I choose some units, some people to go out on the next mission, and you go out on the mission. Um, the events are very like RPG inspired. Like, oh, you've encountered a Russian or a man who's talking incoherently. What do you do? Do you kill him? Do you release him, or do you try to question him? Oh, okay. I tried to question him. We gained a little bit of information, so I get a little bit of a boost in morale or something. So those types of things. Um, there was one very frustrating aspect in that, and it might be my misunderstanding of how the game works, but if you get presented like I hit like a machine gun nest for the Germans, and it was one of them that I had to take out. That was like the last one for the mission. And you only have so much time that you can move around the map. So I was almost out of time to take this guy out. Okay, fine, good. I'm about to take him out. I want to heal my units with some of my limited medical supplies before I take him out. So I closed that window, healed a unit, and then tried to re-engage the enemy. That's it. You have that option to take them out then and only then. So I failed the mission after like an hour of wandering around the
Oh
map
wow.
and grinding through multiple random encounters with these German units, and like each battle is slow because my units are almost dying, and I can only like you can shave off a little of theirs while you keep your guys alive, and then a little bit more and then keep your guys alive. So I learned that like you have your primary units that have more skills, and you have some people you can recruit, and I had a whole team of recruits because my primary units were all healing at the time, and you you probably need to mix it up because it was a lot of a it was too much of a grind, I think, with just the recruits. But
Hmm.
I just wish that there was more. If they had just some character development, just a little bit, like it didn't. I think it would have been a lot stronger of a game. And from what I've seen in reviews, I don't feel like I'm like way off the deep end with this assessment. But
Yeah, it looks like it's kind of middling sixes and sevens type of thing in terms of reviews. So, well, let's stick on the theme of strategy games and go from one brand new one or new-ish years. Warsaw released in October. So let's go all the way back to Age of Empires 2. So Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition with their HD pack and the high-res textures are out on PC through Game Pass. Um, it's Age of Empires 2. It looks really pretty. Uh, you know, if you've played it before and you have nostalgia for it, you're probably gonna, your muscle memory is gonna come back. I do not have any nostalgia for it, mainly because my entrance into Age of Empires really came through Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, which was kind of a skin of Age of Empires 2. And then I went back to try this, so I didn't really have that same type of nostalgia. It is very much what I remember in terms of an RTS game, in terms of collecting resources, dragging a lot of boxes around units to try to keep them together, hotkeying. Uh, Again, I think it does well with the story. It sets up the historical aspects pretty well. There's a lot of different campaigns here. I'm not that far in, um, but I think the same reason that the historical piece grabbed you for Warsaw. I'm not done with Age of Empires 2 yet. It was potentially going to be in my list of games to consider as our remakes of the year, right? As we think about games, the Second Life, um, Second Chance on Life games, and you know, it's free on Game Pass. So if you've ever wondered about the real time strategy genre, this cheap way to get in. It is still a good aspect, a good example of that. But I've always been more of a turn-based strategy guy than a real-time strategy piece. Like I have and will continue to sink hours into Civilization or XCOM versus real-time strategy games like StarCraft or Age of Empires. So that's my own personal preference. So again, going back to, I can appreciate it as a game and a genre. I can also understand that there's a lot going on, and I'll be very curious to see what the numbers look like for this game. Like, is this a game that finds a new audience? Potentially, it certainly could be a good game to stream in terms of multiplayer battles, given the number of units and different strategies that people may take. Uh, but I also wonder how much of a new audience it's going to find, given that it is kind of a genre that has a few examples every year of a new attempt at it, but does not seem to hang on very long as a genre.
I um I was a huge Age of Empires fan when I was younger. I played the first Age of Empires, and then shortly thereafter, I think Age of Empires 2 came out, and I played a lot of that. Uh, Going back, you know, it's fun for like a quick nostalgia trip, but I can understand why RTSs haven't clicked as much. It just feels like I don't know. I don't I on the one hand, like I can get like having to do the resource allocation and set it up, but it feels like you have to rush it, and it's not like you're building an empire. It's just like I got to hurry up and get these units and moving around and just there's a weird tension between city building and wanting to attack stuff. And it's like with all your units and everything and controlling them, attacking stuff isn't as easy, and there's not as much satisfaction. Like I go going back to the moving units around the map, like in a Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics. I get I get like intellectually rewarded for that. I don't
I,
feel it as much with Age of Empires. But then you're like, well, you're building up your city, but you're not. You're just throwing stuff as fast as you can, so you can get the technologies before your opponents do. And it I don't like that race tension, like the tension of the race versus the limited tactical.
yes, I would completely agree with you in terms of, you know, Civilization, XCOM, Final Fantasy Tactics, Fire Emblem, to me always feels like I'm playing video game chess, right? I'm moving things around. I have a chance to kind of strategize about the board and the layout and figure out how I'm going to keep those pieces, how I'm setting up my attacks and my strategies and my defenses. Here I feel like I'm fighting my own ability to, my clicks per minute. That if I, I could think of a strategy, but if I can't implement it quick enough in terms of keeping all my units together and getting them to move, or I've not pumped out enough of a certain type of unit, or run out of a resource in the middle of it, my strategy kind of goes out the window. One piece that I do think that this remake does well is it gives you a mode where you can dive kind of right into the military aspect. It gives you kind of pre-built structures and pre-collected resources, and just says, it focuses on the combat on and the military strategy. So so that part I think is nice. I'll be curious over the holidays if we can get Agasicles to give this a try as RTS fan as well, to see what his thoughts are on it. Again, whether or not it is just me as not the biggest RTS fan, or if it is like you said, the nostalgia aspect is good for a quick pop in and a reminder, but not necessarily something that's going to suck you into a long game discussion as well. So speaking of another game that is gonna, that is not a long game, is I also playing sticking on Game Pass. Played some Blazing Chrome. So this is Contra. Plain and simple. This is a two-player kind of pixel art Contra. It's a really good Contra. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Played through a couple levels, but again, this is the equivalent of I threw a couple quarters in, played 20 minutes, really enjoyed it. I came back to it a couple days later, played another 20 minutes. It was fun. It is more satisfying playing that as a Contra game than the two different times that I've played the demo of Contra Hardcore Rogue Corps from September. So um, that's that. But before I dive into the rest of my games that have kept me busy, keep and thinking about diving into Destiny. Have you and the missus had a chance to dive into Destiny?
I'm sorry.
Today is
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I lost your audio for a second.
I said I was gonna make some snide comment, but now I can't think of any quick off the top of my head. So today is the release of the second season for Destiny 2, with the season of the Dawn, or of Dawn, not of the, but just Dawn. So you've got on your list Shadowkeep. So have you got through the Shadowkeep story? Did you and Vela dive in and play some co-op there? What's your Destiny 2 experience?
Yeah, we've been meaning to pick up Shadowkeep, but we've been busy the last couple of months and haven't had a chance to play. So it went on sale, I guess, because the season was ending, and we each picked up a license. And I went ahead and paid for the deluxe edition to get the 4 seasons worth, even though now we never really got to experience any of the season of the Undying because we were working on the Shadowkeep story. So I'd say we're about halfway through Shadowkeep, um, and I think both of us we've been playing co-op like we usually do. I think both of us have been enjoying it more than we enjoyed Forsaken. Um,
Really? How come? The environment or the pacing of the
I think
story?
it's the environment. The I wasn't a huge fan of the way that when you got to like Spider in Forsaken with like the little bounty missions and all that jazz that they kind of I felt like they were really forcing me. They're like, now go do this type of game that we have set up this mode, and it felt contrived. There's still a little bit of that in
I was going to ask
Shadowkeep,
if you got to that point here where,
and
Eris tells you to go off and complete bounties and
yeah, but moving in at the beginning, there's some nice long set pieces that we enjoyed, I guess, and like there's a sequence when you get like the crypto something or other doohickey, and you have to like take it out, and you get like a almost a Temple of Doom like aspect where once you pull it out, like everybody starts coming after you, and like you just have to sprint out of the lair there while the enemies are just like pouring in, and it's like dark, and you have just your flashlights on the end of your rifle. So there's some nice little set pieces there.
hmm yeah, the Shadowkeep story has some of those nice ones. I just actually 2 nights ago I just finished the final mission for the second time, and there's a lot of good kind of touchstones in there for Destiny fans.
But it's Destiny, and we like it, and it's kind of our go-to co-op game after the kids go to bed. So
Yeah, nice. So the last few games that I've been playing, I deck building kind of roundup here. I have over the past month or so have spent some time with a couple different deck building games. Uh, uh, First started with Cardpocalypse, which is Gambrinus Studios. It's a small little studio in Dublin. It's uh, kind of comic booky cartoon comic strip graphic style. You're a kid in a wheelchair, and it's based around school. But the deck building is this kind of almost like it is this cat and dog superhero kind of in-game show that everybody is obsessed with. The card mechanics are pretty good. There's a lot of it's pretty approachable, which makes sense that it's on mobile. It's right now it's on iOS and on Epic, but it's coming to uh, Switch. It's coming to Android and Steam as well. Uh, I really have enjoyed it. The deck building is not super complex, and so it's pretty easy to jump in and out of. I also find that deck building games, at least for me, if I'm not sticking with them, it's hard to come back to them and remember kind of all the ins and outs of deck building. That was definitely the case with Gwent. So the Witcher's Studio Project Red, um, Gwent on iOS, right? We just had the news story last week that Gwent for consoles is being shut down, and they're just going to focus on PC and mobile. Gwent is fun. I had not really played a lot of The Witcher 3 and spent time with Gwent in there, but really enjoyed the complexity of the cards, but also the fact that it's not Hearthstone, it's not Magic, that there's a rhythm to the game and kind of a logic to its math that was really easy to pick up and play. So Gwent on iOS has been a lot of fun. Um, I also picked up and played some Hearthstone Battlegrounds. So this is the auto battler, the Dota auto chess kind of genre, which which is a little longer in its battles because you're going through multiple different opponents. Um, but one of the things that I enjoyed about it was that you aren't necessarily deck building. You're pulling in heroes as you go. You're adding them to your deck per se, but to your hand. Um, but every game is a whole new series of building up those heroes. So that's not anything that you're needing to unlock more card packs and add stuff to. So Battlegrounds was pretty fun, but I played it for a couple nights in a row and kind of enjoyed it, but I also realized that my limiting knowledge, the knowledge of my lack of knowledge of Hearthstone's world, uh, was a limitation in here because it's a lot of similar characters and cards from the existing game. And so I spent a lot of time kind of learning and thinking about those strategies where if I knew the cards and the mechanics prior, I could start putting together combos probably a little better about which cards played off each other. There was a learning curve there, like most deck building games. And the fourth one and final one is Slay the Spire. So Slay the Spire came out back in January. Lots of good hype around it. It's on Switch and PC. It's also free on Game Pass on PC right now, so that's where I played it. And that is kind of the roguelike deck builder. And that also was easy for me to engage in terms of the fact that it's a roguelike, which meant that I'm building the deck as I go, but it starts all over every run. So I don't have to kind of, have the perfect deck aligned to be able to continue on, or that it's a game that I've been able to kind of come back to once a week and play and enjoy without having to have a whole lot of, keep a lot of knowledge in the forefront of my brain because I'm able to kind of, I'm rebuilding that deck and that experience each time. I've only gotten to the end of the second world boss there of the three different worlds. But sometimes it really, at least for me, it's really depended on some of the. I love the way it's laid out because that it's not all battles. Sometimes you get an option of a path to go to the shop instead of a battle, or go explore a mystery rune, and sometimes it may be cursed, or it may give you a really bonus card or rune as well. And those runes can, I had one where I healed after every battle, or every attack more than 10 uh, gave me 10 to my overshield, right? So there were some of those, like it really allowed me to sustain a long run, where if I wasn't getting something that gave me that type of buff, it was pretty easy to die when I went up against one of the bosses that had, hundreds of hit points, and I just wasn't gonna. My 99 hit point character or whatever was not going to be able to sustain damage long enough to make it through that battle. So, but I completely see where people have engaged and really enjoyed Slay the Spire as well. So that's been uh, probably the one that I've enjoyed the most. And Gwent, I definitely enjoyed playing against the computer, and then I got wiped as I went out into the real world and played against real people with more complex decks than mine. And that's probably where Cardpocalypse and Hearthstone still come in nicely, because in Cardpocalypse, I'm just playing against the computer, and in Hearthstone, I may be playing against other people, but we're all kind of building our decks, building our hands every new game. So uh, deck building games, I always feel like I should like them. I never have spent too much time to really get too invested in them because it always feels like I need to really dive into it when I'm often playing a whole lot of stuff. So things like Slay the Spire, when it is run based, or the auto chess types of games like Hearthstone Battlegrounds, uh, have spoken to me in terms of it's given me an easy way to get back into a genre that I always want to play more of, but am intimidated to play more.
It definitely feels like there's a barrier to entry. If you have to worry about is my deck advanced enough, and then it for me, I haven't I'll be honest, I haven't really played any of those types of games just because I don't. I hope I'm not mischaracterizing it, but if you have to have a great deck in order to win, I don't feel like it's worth my time to invest. I don't know. It's just, you know, let the tactics do the, you know, I feel I want to be rewarded for the tactics, not for how much time did I grind to get, you know, the best cards available or whatever. But
Yep.
that
And that's
that
where I
may be an
think
oversimplification though.
no, but I think I feel that way as well. Like getting into an established deck building game is really difficult because of that, the cards versus the tactic. Like if we all start with an even hand, going back to the real time strategy versus turn based, right? If this is a chessboard, we all start with the same amount of pieces. That your queen doesn't, you know, get three moves, and turns during its time. We all get the same. It's a level playing field, and so sometimes in a deck building game, Magic certainly feels that way, where it doesn't always feel like it's a level playing field depending on who's brought what to the fight. So that's where some of the Hearthstone Battlegrounds has been fun that way because it is not. Um, I don't have to be worried about the deck building piece that we all start relatively flat. There's still some random chance in there, same with Slay the Spire, right? But there's some chance of what cards I'm going to end up getting during that battle, but there's no disadvantage to one player versus the other based on how long they've played or how much money they've sunk into opening packs as well. So, any other? We are at our mark here. Swiss, any other games that you've been playing that you want to hit on quickly?
Uh, no, I haven't played much besides those. I had one last point about Warsaw to tie it back up. You know, like we talked about the simplistic game, but the narrative helping it along. That was like the big, uh, for me, like a kind of crystallized like Death Stranding versus Warsaw. They're, Death Stranding, I can buy in um, to what I'm supposed to be in the narrative, and it's just hard with Warsaw, even though I'm like into the story. There's nothing there to draw me in as a player. It's like there's too much of a barrier there. But
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's too bad. It seems like it was a good concept and an opportunity, and maybe with some patches, it might ultimately be that as well. So we got a lot of games in this kind of final game experience show for the year. Hope everybody will join us back next week. We've got our double episode of our Game of the Year superlatives. The whole crew will be here as we dive into our game experiences, our favorite game experiences, our disappointing game experiences, our hopes and dreams of the year, whether they were realized or dashed. So, Swiss, thank you. It's always good to talk with you, and I appreciate your perspective, especially as we're thinking about and talking about some of those games like Death Stranding and Sekiro. So, excellent discussion tonight. Hopefully, anybody else who wants to dive in and tell us why we're wrong or support Swiss on his Death Stranding expedition, please go ahead and join us in social media on E2KG on Twitter, in our YouTube, and a variety of our other streams. You have people like Agasicles, Game Logic, Game IQ, Game Logic Q on Discord, and Osiris Prime on Discord as well, who are going to be out and streaming right throughout the holiday season. So please feel free to continue to engage with us and join in our conversations here on the Enough to Keep Going E2KG network. So for myself, DBQ Hams, and Swiss, it is a wonderful time of the year. It is cold and a good reason to stay inside and play some more games. So everybody enjoy, and until next week, good night.